Hey guys, welcome to week 1 of our May groups. I'm so excited that you joined a group. This is step 1 in getting more connected, and that is our goal, is that you would get more connected. And so I want to welcome you here today. I hope that you're excited because I know all of us group leaders are really excited to begin this study. So what this is going to look like is each week we are going to study a different chapter of the book of Philippians. Now, as I've been looking over the book of Philippians, it's also called the Epistle of Joy. And I love that. I think that's such a cool thing. And for those of us who didn't know what the word epistle meant, I looked it up. It just means a letter. It's a letter of joy. It's a book about joy in the midst of difficult situations. And I think what a timely message this is for all of us, right? A book about joy in the midst of difficult situations. And this is one of the reasons why I really love the Bible. Anybody that knows me knows that I really love the Bible. And it's because we can take this message that was written thousands of years ago, but we can apply it to our life today. It actually encourages us in our current situation. It's almost like somebody knew that we would need this when it was written 2,000 years ago. It's amazing. I can't even believe it. So what I want to do to get started is I want to encourage you each week as you come to group, just read through the chapter that we're on. If you didn't do it this week, it's no big deal. But each week, I'd love for you to be prepared, to be engaged, to add to the discussion in your group. Because our two goals for groups are to connect you closer to Jesus and to connect you deeper in relationship with the people that you're in group with. And if you're prepared, if you've come in thinking maybe you have a question about something you read, or maybe you really loved a passage in that chapter, come with those, come with questions, come with revelations or anything that you might have gotten out of that chapter, and that will be awesome, okay? So one of the things I really like to do when I'm studying a book of the Bible is to think about, why was this book written? Who was it written to? What was going on when the writer wrote this book? And so I want to do just a little bit of backstory on this as we get started. So the author of the book of Philippians is a guy named Paul. Most of you guys have probably heard of Paul. He was an apostle. He was a great man of God, and he founded the church at Philippi years before the book was written. And at the time when Paul wrote this book, he was actually in prison. And so he knew a thing or two about finding joy in the midst of a difficult situation, okay? And this is really cool. So when Paul founded the church at Philippi, it was a really neat story. And this is one of the cool things about the Bible, is when you learn why a book was written, you get some more information about what was going on. And so I'm going to tell you, I looked into this. I didn't just know this stuff. I found this out. But the book of Acts actually gives us insight into the time when this church launched, okay, to put it in church planners terms. So in Acts 16, Paul receives a vision from God, and it's of a man that says, hey, please come to Macedonia. We need you. And so Paul's like, I don't want to go to Macedonia. I wasn't planning on going to Macedonia, but he got this vision. And so they shift courses. And I just want to read this really quickly in Acts 16. It says, the Holy Spirit had prevented them from preaching the word in the province of Asia at that time. What an interesting thing to note, that a closed door was not a stop sign for Paul, but it was yet redirection. It was more of a directional sign. And I think that's something we can apply to our lives today. How many of us get frustrated with stop signs or closed doors and we're like, why won't this happen? It might not be a stop sign. It might just be a directional sign that's telling you to go a different way. And that's exactly what happened. Paul ended up in Philippi, okay? And when he got there, he didn't even see the guy that he had the vision of, but he met a woman by the water. Her name was Lydia. And he began to share the gospel with her, and her whole family came to know Jesus. So then that is amazing. They're celebrating. But then some bad things kind of start to happen to Paul in this season. He cast the devil out of this really crazy lady that's following him around, and her owners got really mad and they had him arrested. They had him stoned, they had him stripped naked in the street and thrown into prison. But then what happens in Acts 16 is this is the time when Paul and Silas are in prison, and they begin to sing praises to God. They begin to sing just in joy and praising him for who he is. And there's an earthquake, the prison doors open, and they're set free. Amazing. Then the guard and his whole family get saved. This was how the church at Philippi was born. This is the story of how the church came to be. The foundation of the church was surrounded in difficult situations, but where they found joy. And so I think when we learn about how something comes to comes to be and is born, we know exactly what it's about. This was a letter written to the church to have joy in difficult situations. And there's so many different things we can talk about, but a few different things that I really want to focus in on is that Paul writes in chapter 1 of his love for these people. He has affection for this church, and he begins to pray over them and pray for them. And one of the things that he says in verse 6, he says, I'm certain that God, who began the good work within you, will continue his work until it is finally finished. It makes me think that maybe some of the difficulties they were a part of were making them feel like God wasn't going to do what he said he would do. And Paul's reminding them, God is faithful. He will continue the good work that he started in you. And he goes on to talk about joy. And in this book, we're going to see that the word joy is said 5 times and the word rejoice is said 11 times. His encouragement to these people was to find joy in preaching the gospel. No matter what happens, to continue to find joy in Jesus, right? And so in verse 10, the last 10 verses of this chapter are so good. The whole book is good. It is so hard to pick out 1 or 2 things and talk about it for 5 or 10 minutes because there's so much good stuff in these verses. Paul struggles with longing to go and be with Jesus, right? Because he's suffering. He even talks about, hey, it'd be better if I died. Like if I was dying, at least I would be with Jesus. But I know that I need to live because there's so much more that I can do to spread the good news. It says in verse 21, I love this. He's so focused on preaching the gospel. In verse 21, he says, For to me, living means living for Christ, but dying is even better. But he's saying, hey, another version says to live is Christ and to die is gain. He saw no matter what happened to him, he was going to be with Jesus. He was going to honor Jesus. His whole focus and goal was to bring people to a saving knowledge of who Jesus was. He had a God-centered perspective. That's how you keep joy in the midst of whatever's going on around you. You keep a God-centered perspective. And he's continuing to remind the church, don't forget to focus on Jesus. Don't forget of the goal. And in the last part of this chapter, in verse 27, it says, I will know that you stand firm in one spirit, striving together as one for faith of the gospel. What's he talking about? Unity. One spirit, same purpose. I used to teach a class a long time ago called Purity with Purpose. And one of the things that we talked about in that class was understanding your purpose. So many of us don't understand our specific purpose. We don't know the very specific thing God called us to do. But what we do know is this. Each of us has a purpose to speak of the good news of Jesus, to spread the word, to be Jesus to people that are around us, to show the love of Christ. That's your purpose. If you don't know anything else you're called to do, anything else you were created to do, you can be encouraged with the fact that we are all of one spirit and one faith for the gospel, for the spreading of the good news. And so that's my encouragement to you today. As you continue in your group, as you discuss, as you talk about it, as you pray for one another, here's what I want to encourage you. The purpose of your life, all of our lives, is the same. One spirit, right? We all have the same spirit, is to keep sharing the good news. When the rest of the world is sharing the bad news, when the rest of the world is sharing the fearful news or the worrying news or any of those things, we can be a people that share the good news of the gospel. And so I'm so excited that we're gathering together in these groups for the next 4 weeks to encourage ourselves in faith and encourage ourselves in joy. So have a fantastic group. Make sure you participate, add to the conversation, and I look forward to seeing you next week.